live, eat all I want, which is probably more than I should.
Can't beat free. Mm-mm. And this is free here back at the Bible Recap Podcast. Free to you and free to us to get into God's Word. So appreciate your patience on our hiatus while I was on some vacay. And, of course, we had the holidays and just been up and down, sideways, and all that good stuff. And so thank you for sticking with us and bless you. And so we are in week 37 here. And, yes, that's how many days? 15 weeks left on. 15 weeks.
Almost 4 months.
4 months. We'll get there someday.
But this has been, oh my goodness. But this has been a great journey. I mean, even though there's been time involved, it's just getting deeper than I think, we have in many different ways. And of course, for some of you who've watched at home, I mean, you said, hey, this has been something that's really stood up for them.
I've had several customers ask about it.
Really?
So I've had people, Pam Acton was one of them. So, hey, Pam.
She's been doing it herself.
Yeah.
Too,
so, but I've had about 5 or 6 people reach out. So
I've had other pastors say they've checked out what we're doing. So
that's cool.
So, all right. So week 37 here. So we're finishing the book of Ezekiel. It's chapters 43 to 48. We read the entire book, Minor Prophet Joel. It's just 3 chapters. And then we get into the first 12 chapters. Well, actually, just the book of Daniel. Or excuse me. For some reason, I think Daniel's longer than that, but it is 12 chapters, so I apologize. And, of course, again, as always, that's Tyler yawning. There's Queen Dawn, and I'm Josh. And
it's nighttime around
Tyler,
here.
I forgot to ask before we kicked off, who's got the questions?
Dawn's starting.
Oh, I start?
Dawn's kicking off. All right.
Yeah, good. She can have the big paragraph.
All right, question number 1. In every day's reading up until the final 3 days of Ezekiel, where he shares his temple vision, God repeatedly uses the phrase, "They shall know that I am the Lord." By some counts, it shows up roughly 70 times. Do you think there's any significance in the number?
I went down a little bit of a rabbit hole with Google on this, but I came down to the 70 years to come back to Jerusalem. But then I also kind of, they would say that, I don't remember exactly, I think it was 70 plus 10 years or something like that was the life of a man, which would come down to 30 plus 10 is 70. And there were 70 descendants of Noah. Mm-hmm. And then 70 is also symbolizes fullness, restoration, and an end point. So I think it also was kind of that they shall know I am the Lord is kind of the end point. Like, at that point, you know what you need to know. Yeah. So I don't know, just some things I thought was kind of interesting, but I think ultimately it was the 70 years of going back to Jerusalem is kind of what she was aiming for there.
Yeah.
Yep, I'm glad you went down that rabbit hole. That's kind of where I went too. And then also to me, it's very humbling. I mean, just when it's repeated many times, it's just, it's kind of like pounding it in.
Yeah, putting that stake down. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep, that was part of what I was, when I was reading, it was, usually when God repeats himself, he's, especially 70 times, like it means something. So
for sure. I really don't have anything to add to that. I mean, I think you covered it, and I would agree. I think there's some significance to 70 because if the ultimate goal is knowing God, and that, of course, includes salvation, relationship, engagement, whatever you want to add to that. And if 70 is, a number that represents a type of completion, fulfillment, from saying, so you know the Lord, so you know me. Mm-hmm. And so I think, So,
I just thought it was kind of cool reading all of those different things. And they had some others, but those are kind of the ones that I felt pertained a little bit anyways.
Yeah. So. All right. Number 2. Why do you think God stops using that phrase when he starts describing the temple?
Did you go down a rabbit hole on that one?
No. That one I had a hard time answering. But I kind of just took it as like that's where you can be close to God. So I don't know, that's probably not the right answer, but I think God was showing, I don't. This is where I kind of went back and forth, I guess, like where this doesn't make sense or it does make sense. We thought as the temple is a place to worship, and like it also, I think God wants us. He's everywhere. He's with us all the time. So I was like, okay, that's not really the answer, but I think, I wanted to. Then I was trying to talk myself into that God is the temple. But,
see, that's where I went, but maybe I was off.
But then I don't know. Then I was going, your body's a temple thing, and I'm like, that doesn't seem like, like I don't know. I was in my own head, I think, and so. If someone wants to answer that question, I'd be one.
But I'm kind of with you. I kind of said the same thing, that he had said it enough that I think we were developing that frame of mind that he is the temple. He is everywhere. He is the existence.
It's not a physical place. It is.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I just hit me. So thanks, Son.
Well, and I think to a degree, there's also some end times. New heaven, new earth, and because one thing to think about too is that this is for the Jewish people whose only understanding of the relationship with God is in His house, this house that first Solomon built, and of course is going to be rebuilt, and so for them, for this, I think for this imagery to a degree, it's giving them a picture that may be slightly literal, but also in a sense, signifying something else that we've already shared. So I don't want to, duplicate. But I think I think we're seeing some of that end time picturing, because we're going to see with Daniel, where we got some hinting of the arrival of the Holy Spirit in Ezekiel already as well. And of course, even Isaiah, who's, several years before Ezekiel, Isaiah's already been talking about when God returns. And so I think, in essence, we're kind of seeing God start to draw at least some connective imagery to what's going to happen. Of course, ultimately fulfilled possibly in Jesus, but also what's also going to come when everything is finally made right, when what was achieved on the cross is going to be completed with the arrival of the new heaven and new earth. That's all I got to add.
That's your story, and you're sticking to it?
Yep.
All right. In all the dimensions and descriptions of Ezekiel's temple vision, what stood out to you the most and why? I would just say the size. Again, I Googled, because I'm a very visual person. I can't read something and picture it. So it was a very good picture on Google that compared it to several different things. So it compared it to just like in a visual, like American football field, to Solomon's temple. There was 3 other things that they were biblical. One was, I think, the tents of the, would have been for the Ark of the Covenant.
The tabernacle?
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to spit out there.
Well, for the folks at home, what did you see about the comparison?
Like, it dwarfed everything. It was, you probably could have fit 10 football fields in it, comparatively, just going off size. Probably not quite that many, probably 8. But it was, it made it would have been, even with all of the 8 items, it would have fit still inside of, there was 6 items. It would have fit inside of the walls of the temple. So it was huge.
Yeah.
And mostly how, we talked about how Solomon's temple was so like state of the art at the time, and it literally dwarfed it. Like it was probably a fourth of the size of what this temple was.
Yeah.
So it was kind of visually, that was pretty cool to see. So
I was more on the size too. I mean, that was what kind of impressed me or made me think about it more. And then I'd have liked to have kind of seen it.
One of the things I thought about, and it makes sense, but also, I think about the picture of heaven and the city, is the doors. Yeah. I don't know why, but the doors. And I think part of it is my first reading is like, why would anyone want to leave?
Yeah.
I was thinking, this is the temple, not the city. And so, reorient myself on, how big, the new Jerusalem is going to be. If the temple is going to be this massive, just think how big, the new city is going to be. And so I think that's what really, as I thought about it, still stood out to me that there's, 3 doors on each side. And how massive they are. And I'm thinking, flow to get people in out of a church or a stadium. And I was like, you need all those ins and outs. Cause I think, we're going to be in and out all the time.
Arrowhead or even, I've never been to Arrowhead, but when we went to the Dallas Cowboys Stadium, which is the largest NFL stadium, just everyone circling or, leaving there. It was
the craziest sports place I've ever been in and out of, was Richmond Raceway.
Yeah.
100, I think it was 105,000 people were at that race. 105,000. Lawrence isn't that big.
Yeah.
And they were on a racetrack.
Yeah.
And I thought about that because it took forever to get in. Where I think I did a run to a porta potty because it's just taking that long. Sorry. Didn't mean to, not intentionally do a bathroom humor, but just emphasize how long the wait was. In the fact that some places they're cramming a city into these spaces. I mean, I was at the KU game Monday. I mean, that's 16,000 people.
Yeah.
And
clearing out of there isn't easy either.
That's roughly 6 Burlingtons.
Yeah.
They get crammed into that place.
And it's not that big.
Yeah.
It's a pretty cool place, but not that big. So, the doors would need to be a pretty big deal.
Yep.
So
there was something else that I'm trying to find it. I don't remember if it was in her writings or if it was actually, but God's room was the smallest. Where am I reading that?
Oh, you're talking about the Holy of Holies?
And I know it. Wasn't that in this week?
No. Well, I know in part of the scripture, I mean, it's, in the temple structure, I mean, the Holy of Holies is usually the smallest space. But one thing to note, even how massive this space is.
It's still not that small?
It's still not that small, but it talks about that basically it's God's footstool. It's where he's placing his feet. I mean, and so even as big as this place is, it can't contain him. Which I think is a good imagery because sometimes we want to put God in a box.
Right. So that I just remember that kind of sticking out.
Oh, it was. Sorry, I had to look it up. Harold's Temple was what they compared it to as well. In the court of the tabernacle. So.
Okay, sorry.
You're okay.
You're
okay.
Number 4. Read Joel 2:27 and 3:17 aloud. This book was likely written around the same time as the book of Ezekiel, and it references the same phrase that God spoke through Ezekiel repeatedly. Why do you think both prophets reference the same phrase?
If I can get my stuff to work here. I'll get 2:27. If I can get there. Okay. Then you will know that I am in Israel, that I am the Lord your God, and that there is no other. Never again will my people be shamed.
And 3:17 is, so you shall know that I am the Lord your God, who dwells in Zion, my holy mountain. And Jerusalem shall be holy, and strangers shall never again pass through it. That was 3:17.
Silence.
I just have it. It's evident to both people, and they're again proclaiming.
Yeah, I was kind of going with God wouldn't tell them two separate things. I feel like I think if they truly are prophets, that God wouldn't give them two separate stories to give. Like
Oh.
he's teaching one word, one thing, and he'd give them the same information.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And well, and I think about, like, for any of us, we have particular speech patterns and vocabulary.
Yeah.
And so if God's the one talking to these prophets and same goal,
Yeah.
why wouldn't he use the same language? I mean, it might tweak a little bit, but
different. Yeah.
but that's, of course, talking to two different people.
Yeah.
But again, same phraseology, same person, God giving them each, the message that he wants that's related if they're contemporaries.
Take care of its people.
Yep. All right. Number 5. King Nebuchadnezzar quickly goes from giving praise to Yahweh for Daniel's dream interpretation skills to building a statue in honor of himself. Can you think of a time when your heart pivoted quickly from God to self or something else?
I mean, that was kind of like a
Yeah.
throw it out there. What have you done? Where you?
Here's my dirty laundry.
I just said no.
I kind of just went with talent. I know this, you'll have to follow me here. So, God-given talent, but that would usually be the first thing that you start praising yourself about. Like, I was thinking about playing football and things like that. Like, my talent, I worked hard to get that, but that's God-given.
I see what you're saying.
Like, it's not necessarily that, I prayed to God that I would be, 6'7", 210 pounds, and be able to jump out the sky. But I would take what God has given me as I did it myself, not that God gave me that. So that's the way I went with it. Not that I can't air my dirty laundry of just for sure taking God, but that's how way I took it. The only thing I could think of is.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
I might have to change my tune a little. No, I honestly can't. I don't know.
So.
Because I think I do realize the talents that I have come from Him, but I don't know that I self-proclaim them.
Yeah.
I will tell you the temptation is awful in the process of, in the former process of becoming a pastor. Or it's, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? What have you been involved in? How have you helped grow the church? I'm like, and for me, that's just that creates an internal tension because because you probably should, you need to share what you've been doing, but it can become so person focused that we start. Well, I will tell you, there's been times where churches can and denominations can view pastors and preachers as as the golden goose that will lay these golden eggs that will. But I will tell you, you take many of these large church pastors, you drop them in middle of nowhere, Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, whatever, they're not going to have the same effect.
Yeah.
Than where to where they're at, especially if you give them pre-celebrity status.
Yeah.
Come on now.
Oh yeah.
Because unfortunately, too many large church pastors. They're known by their ego.
Yeah.
Not by their faithfulness. They're known by their ego.
Yeah. Well, it's like if you mentioned Joel Osteen, I was about to say the other one that's in the news a lot. But I was listening to a podcast yesterday. They brought him up, and that he's known for his fancy suits, fancy cars, fancy houses. It's not for what he's done for God, and it's like he becomes a commodity, not what God should be. So we're doing godly things.
Yes.
All right. Is it me on 6?
Yep.
In Daniel 4, God speaks to Nebuchadnezzar through dreams, through Daniel, and through an audible voice. Which form of communication might be the easiest to misunderstand or misinterpret? What might be helpful in knowing his communication is from God, is all from God? I said that dreams would be the hardest for me, mostly because I have deja vu. And so it's just hard for me to communicate, like to believe that all the time. And so like I try to not dream as much as possible because it's, I don't know. I know it sounds weird because it'll just throw my whole day off when I have it. So, and I would find it extremely helpful if God would give me a little hint, like, hey, pay attention to this. Like, you know, this is for me. But, you know, through Daniel, I could understand that because I'm awake. I could be able to take that the way I would need to take it. Okay, I think God is telling me this. Or through an audible voice, I'm awake. I know I'm awake. You know, I've had crazy dreams, so I don't, you know, I don't want something to seem crazy that God would be communicating with me. If I had my choice, I would prefer it to be the other two than dreams. God, I'll take a dream though. So if you want me to, but please give me the heads up.
Well, I'd take the dream too, but I mean, I think the dream can be the one that can be misunderstood because we're trying to figure out what that dream meant. Where if you have somebody speaking to you or an audible voice, then you can maybe ask a little bit more questions.
Yeah.
So it's a dream for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think dreams can be the easiest. I'll tell you, I've had several dreams where I held on to them, but like God showed me something, but not sure how to make sense of it. So this is the first time publicly sharing this. So for 3 years, once a year, I had a dream of empty churches, but I was still preaching, and yet I was distant from folks. And lo and behold,
COVID.
the dream stopped. COVID, churches are empty, and I'm talking to a screen, and I'm distant from folks. I'm like, why did that, God gives me for 3 years. Why didn't I do a little bit more preparation? Because he's giving me other dreams, but that's one that just, I keep thinking about. I was like, why didn't I respond more or pray and ask for direction? Because if there was going to be an emptying, and of course, maybe it's not all COVID, maybe it's other things too. But yeah, just empty churches. I'm still preaching. There's distance.
But we could pretty much roll right into number 7 with this one.
Do you believe God has spoken to you through a dream? If so, what was the experience like, and how did you respond to it?
I'm going to say no, because I don't truly believe he had, because either my dreams are way out there or it's so realistic. It's just like everyday life. So, like I said, I do have deja vu about 3 times a year where it's something I even pinpointed. I wrote down a dream I had because when I was probably 12 or 13 years old, and I had that come into my life it happened about a year later, but it was nothing crazy about it. It was just like I've seen some people that I've never seen before in that dream. I kind of wrote down what they look like, and then I have this deja vu. It's like, I've seen this before, I know it, and then I just happen to remember I wrote it down. So, but I don't think it was from God, because it wasn't anything super crazy or out there. But if God has, I apologize. I don't remember.
I feel like I have, and we've talked about one of them, and then I had one just more recently. But I have peace overcome. I mean, it just overcomes me. So I'm always eager to receive one of those.
Yeah.
I'll share another dream. There was time where life seemed rough, and I felt like things just couldn't go right, and like I was kind of under attack, and I remember praying, and of course, I would like an audible answer, but of course God didn't give one. But I ended up getting a dream where I'm standing by myself, and demons are attacking me, and I'm shouting Laos Deo, which is praise be to God in Latin. I was taking Latin at the time, so that probably played a role in it. But for me, it just God was saying, you're in a spiritual situation. Life's rough because there's something spiritual going on. It's not because of somebody or class or work or whatnot. It's just the devil's trying to knock you down, and you could.
Well, that probably didn't bring you peace. So what did you feel from that?
Well,
or did
I felt understanding, because in the dream, I mean, I was resisting and just lay us down, and the demons were reacting against that. And so I think in the sense of dream, he showed me that I was going to be faithful through it as well. So
cool.
Yeah.
They don't happen very often. So I share this. They're not like coming to me left, right, and center. But they on occasion. Because like the empty church dream, I mean, that was once for 3 years.
So odd.
I had reoccurring dreams, but there's nothing cool like that one.
All right. So let's see. Number 8.
ESPN.
Ocho is Spanish.
Yeah. ESPN the Ocho.
When you read the prophetic books of Scripture, what is your intellectual and or emotional response? Do you find it hard to look for God and his character instead of just looking for a forecast of the future? What do our responses reveal about our hearts?
I usually look for an emotional response. Is usually, let me rephrase this. I'm reading with an emotional response usually, like, and then and I am usually turn to the Bible if I'm needing guidance. And so that's where I should turn to it for all the time. But a lot of times when I'm going to it outside of this is I'm looking for guidance, or I guess you could say a forecast of the future, or, I'm needing to make a decision I'm not entirely sure on. And I think at the end of the day, we're individuals. We look out for who we believe is number one in ourselves a lot of times but we should be looking out. We always feel better when we help other people. So I think that's something, not looking inward, looking outward is probably where I need to go more.
I answered yes. I find it hard to look for God and his character instead of just looking for a forecast of the future, because I kind of like to be.
Yeah.
What does that say about me? I think it says about me, sometimes I'm lacking in my faith and I'm just weary. Some days I just don't want to deal with it. So I know that doesn't say what it reveals about me, but.
Well, I think part of looking for a forecast is that we want to know.
Yeah.
And if you figure it out, you're the one in the know. And guess what? You can tell people that you're in the know. But of course, for others, there could be a control issue. For others, it could be the control could be motivated out of fear as well. And as for forecasts, I mean, think of all the stuff we think about for the future. I mean, even before we had the Weather Channel app, even before we had forecast on TV. I mean, there was the Farmer's Almanac and those sayings, red at night, sailor's delight. I mean, we like to know what's coming down the road, and we also appraise people who can predict other people's behavior. I mean, that's what makes military commanders so valuable, if they can predict what the enemy. So, in a sense, we value forecasting.
I also think we've been taught by so many different people that this has all the answers. And so you go to it for, guidance or an answer versus to be closer to God. And that's kind of what I've learned throughout the Old Testament is that's the Bible. This is my opinion. The Bible isn't a forecast to tell you how you live your life. It is stories on telling you how not to, but also how God just wants you to come to him and he'll provide from there. So
that you may know.
Yes.
That he is the Lord.
Yes, he is the Lord. They shall know that I am the Lord. So.
Full circle. How about that?
Yeah.
All right. Nueve.
Mm-hmm.
It's also Spanish.
Yep. I know those two, and that's probably about hola, and that's about it. What did you learn? Sorry.
9.
What did you learn or appreciate most about Daniel's sneak peek in the spiritual realm in chapter 10 and 12 through 12? One of my favorite people throughout all the Bible is Michael the Archangel. Always has been. I grew up Catholic. There is literally a prayer to Michael the Archangel. When I went to Catholic school, we got to pick a prayer to say, and that was always mine. We also dressed up for Halloween. You had to dress up as a saint. You couldn't dress up as anything else. And I picked Michael the Archangel almost every year. Also, almost every other boy. But just how Michael's fighting for all of God's people, not just for Daniel, that it is literally says all of God's people. So it was something that I really kind of just connected with my childhood there a little bit, but also it's very heartwarming to know that God's, lead soldier, I guess I was going to say right-hand man, but that would be Jesus, is fighting for us because we are God's people, not just because, or XYZ. So that was what I appreciated the most.
I want to hear your answer first.
Okay. So for me, it's very basic. Is that what Daniel is given, and of course what's shared with us, is that he's shown us the reality of the spiritual realm. In the fact that for us today, we've come through the Enlightenment, modernism, where it's I gotta see it to believe it. Very scientific, cold, and so in essence, it's a good reminder for us that there is more beyond what we can see, beyond what we can measure, even beyond what, for the most part, we can comprehend, because we can be so visual or audible, to where we want for it to be we want to tangibly mess with it, and so I think for to her question, for me, it's to the basic that somebody put it this way: we are not human beings, or we are not bodies with spirits. We are spirits with bodies. And so to fully understand that we are spiritual beings, and the fact that there is a spiritual reality, and there's also spiritual warfare. I tend to balk at that usage because some people abuse it, but there's spiritual warfare going on around us as well. Again, not saying that the devil hides behind every rock and tree and branch, but that there are things going on around us.
And I kind of took I like both of your answers, definitely. I kind of took it from it too, that it was a little bit, for me, I felt like those 2 chapters or 3 chapters actually was telling me I had the opportunity to continue to grow with that spirituality, that I had time to try to understand it. And I wasn't going to be able to understand it all the time, and it would be maybe a growing process for me throughout my lifetime, that it was just giving me that opportunity to am I making any sense?
Yeah.
But I just felt like it was teaching me that I have time to get into this, that I don't have to understand it right away, because I'm not going to, but God was going to allow me to grow with that.
You're good.
Okay.
It's your story and you're sticking to it.
I don't know. I'm just like,
Don't kick yourself.
My whole thing was just, it was giving me more time. I felt like it was just telling me I had time to understand all this. Lord, I hope that I still have time.
Yeah. We'll figure it out someday, right, Dawn?
Maybe.
All right. Our favorite question of the week, because it's the only one that stays the same. What's God's character and the God shots? Mine was 259. Once I get there, these pages seem way thicker than. All right. Sometimes we want to know exactly what to expect because it lets us off the hook of having to trust God. We treat details about the future like a security blanket, but the only knowledge that brings security is knowledge of who God is. There are many things in this book that God only told Daniel. Other things he doesn't even share when Daniel asks. Even some angels aren't informed about certain things. As we read these prophecies, we can rest knowing that we do not have the master book of Daniel and map out what may or may not be happening in the future, because Yahweh is already there and he is where the joy is. That kind of goes into my last couple questions ago about usually going to when I need something, guidance or future. Like, this kind of helps me know that we're not going to know everything that God needs. Like, not everything is predictable or can be found in the book. Like, you got to really just trust in him and know that God is going to take care of us at the end. So, not saying that bad things aren't going to happen, not saying only good things are going to happen, but he's going to get you where we need to go, as long as we trust and believe in him. It's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
And I'll just say that really was probably my favorite, but
yeah.
I let Tyler have it. But I will, I'll go to day 258. Little phrases in these visions show us how all this is part of God's plan, how his enemies are on a leash, and how the clock is ticking on their part of the story. Dominion is both given to and taken away from the four beasts. There's the appointed time for things, and there will be a limit on transgression. And there's a decreed end. God is sovereign over his enemies, over his timeline, over his plan. Still, with all the nation-sized things on his to-do list, he sends a messenger to remind his prophet, "You are greatly loved. He's in the rise and fall of kingdoms, and he's in the tiny whispers to his servants, and he's where the joy is." I think this, again, is just kind of a great reminder, actually, of what we're going through now. And there is always going to be a fall and a rise in everything. And it's just knowing that he's still in control of everything. And he is where the joy is. So if we trust in him,
Yep.
even though it doesn't feel like sometimes we're going to be okay, I think we are going to be okay.
That's what she said.
Yep. And she's sticking to it.
Yes.
I picked day 254. The name of the city from that time on shall be, "The Lord is there." So whenever this comes to complete fruition, God says he's not going anywhere. No more trekking through the wilderness, no more captivity or exile, and he promises to stay there forever. So of course that's where I want to be, because he's there and he's where the joy is. I think it's so easy for us to have a concept or understanding of God that he's always up there, when, the promise of Jesus to get the Holy Spirit means 2 or 3 gathered, there he is. Temple of the Holy Spirit, our bodies individually and collectively. And so that's what stands out to me, because I think some of the hope that people need is that God is not distant and above. Mm-hmm. He's very present and real. He's there. He's trustworthy. And so, as she quotes from Ezekiel, that the city should be called "The Lord is there." Of course, again, the city doesn't contain him. The temple doesn't contain him. And the fact is that God was, I think, in the sense, he'll still be on the move. I don't think he's just going to sit in one place, because there's talking about a house and a feast, and so. But I think we'll have a fresh, and then of course complete understanding of the presence of God when it comes that time.
Sure hope so. There's still a lot of things I'm confused on.
So, don't know exactly how it looks like, but I think we're going to be totally blown away about how we're actually going to experience the presence of God.
Oh, yes.
All right. Well, thank you guys again so much for joining us on week 37 of the podcast here, Bible Recap. Again, appreciate you guys' faithfulness. Next week, of course, week 38, we tackled the book of Ezra. And so, of course, the entire book, that's chapters 1 to 6. We've got the small prophet Haggai, 2 chapters. There's Zechariah. There's 14 chapters. And then we only get into 5 chapters of the book of Esther. So we got several small books. Then we get into part of Esther. And then we have a psalm, Psalm 137. And so make sure you put that on your reading list. And again, if you'd like to get a book, you can.
Looks like we got 2 weeks left, and then we start the New Testament.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, we're getting close on finishing the Old Testament. And I know we've been doing this for over a year now, but
not quite. We started in
February,
February,
I think.
But even then, for me, it still seems like we didn't start too long ago because we've been cruising so fast. So, anyways,
for sure.
All right. Bless you. Thank you for joining us again. That's Tyler. That's Don. I'm Josh. We'll see you next week. Take care and God bless.
Bye.